Is Charlotte being boxed into a corner? Big box buildings sit vacant throughout the city. Question is, what should be done with them? Mary Hopper of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission joins me to talk about the latest plans in the works. Plus, preserving Charlotte's history. More and more neighborhoods are joining in the push to get historic status. What's the benefit, and what are some neighborhoods willing to do while others aren't? The chairman of the Historic District Commission addresses the issues. I'm Joey Popp in for Chris Clackham. The notable names of Charlotte get ready to answer the questions you're asking next on Charlotte Tonight.
This program is made possible by viewers like you.
It's a familiar scene, big buildings sitting vacant in various parts of our city. The thriving businesses that once existed either moved or went out of business. What should happen to these buildings now? Who should be responsible for them? In some cases, the empty buildings can take on new lives. For example, this old retail store in North Park Mall is now a neighborhood medical center. This old Target store on Independence is about to be torn down and replaced with another major store. But many more still sit empty, attracting crime and harming the smaller stores located nearby. How can Charlotte encourage the redevelopment of vacant stores? And who should be responsible? The city of Charlotte or the companies who leave these buildings behind? No doubt it's a growing problem here in Charlotte, and join me tonight to get a clearer picture of the problem and a potential solution is Mary Hopper, who is a member of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. And let me start by asking, is this really as big of a problem as it appears, Mary?
Well, I think when you see it, it's a problem. But what is happening is that a number of people in the development industry are rehabbing these. They're turning over. And then if the positioning of it is correct, if it's in the right location, if the shopping public has not left that particular area, then at some point it will be used again, more than likely as another retail site.
Okay, we're going to talk about more during the next few moments. We first took this question, speak up, speak out, to the viewers of Charlotte as to what should be done and who should be held responsible.
I think they should be redeveloped to their highest and best use as quickly as possible. And I think that the owners, the previous owners, should bear primary responsibility, but I think that the city should play a role in making sure that those facilities are redeveloped.
Well, the owners have to be responsible. The city doesn't own the building. But what we need to do is give the owners some relief from the oppressive zoning and building standards regulations so that they can still have a safe facility but not be forced into some of the upgrades that are necessary to restore.
I think the owners should be responsible for that. I mean, they're the ones that, took the responsibility to own the building, and they should have the responsibility of trying to sell it. If they want to sell it to the city and maybe use it as a multi-purpose facility, then that's what they should do.
Well, they certainly should not be left vacant for a long period of time, number one. Number two, they should look at the area and see if it can't be used very well for something else. And then only at the very end should they give up.
So, Mary Hopper, part of the Planning Commission, can you hold these companies liable for abandoning the property?
In some communities, they are taking that tact. One of the processes that we looked at that our chairman, David Anderson, was particularly interested in was what he called a paying into a fund, so that once you left it, you would have access to your own money and you could demolish it or you could bring it up to code, but you would be required to pay in for the life of the lease, which typically can be a relatively long time.
Now, I had an opportunity to read your report, and you're talking about a demolition bond. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Is
I'm
that,
glad you remembered.
is that a new type of responsibility to these companies?
Yes, my understanding, and David Anderson is the expert on this. He has looked at it, and he's much more the financial wizard than I am. But he also talked with a number of people in the industry, and they had an interest in that and helped him refine how something like that may work. I refer to that as one of our sticks. There are things that would be requirements that would be made of the owners, of the developers of the property.
Give me some examples here.
Well, in some case, they would be required to mask that property, perhaps with shrubbery or something like that. There was just a whole litany of things. I will tell you that my understanding of Charlotte is that typically we will use what we call carrots first.
Okay.
We will give incentives, and it was interesting to see the interviews because in some cases the owner may be as much a victim as anybody. There's been a bankruptcy. They have little or no control over something like that. The demographic that they were trying to serve has shifted from a population, and they've not been able to do things. Sometimes, though, it's difficult to feel good about what they've done when you see them going from a big box to a bigger box to an even bigger box and leaving what I refer to as these carcasses all along the corridors. That's very difficult. But we also, and I was glad that a number of the people interviewed looked at the introduction of incentives. Just within the last several days, there's been news on a rehabilitation code. It is something that's been used in New Jersey and in Maryland. And what they say is when you rehabilitate one of these buildings, you don't have to make it new, which is very expensive, and consequently it's cheaper to build from scratch. All you have to do is to make it safe, and it would give the redeveloper, in this case, instead of the developer, give them some relief. The other things that we have looked at is...
Other incentives?
Other incentives are things that might include grandfathering in or giving them a by right use so that they wouldn't have to take it through the rezoning process, which sometimes, number one, it's expensive. Number two, it kicks in a lot of regulations on tree plantings and sidewalks and things like that that add to the cost.
How about tax relief?
We've looked at those as well. What we are doing, our committee was a lay committee, although we got real good cooperation from industry insiders, which we were very pleased with. I think initially they came to say, oh my goodness, what are these folks getting ready to do to us? But once they realized that we genuinely wanted to learn, wanted to know some things about their industry that clearly we did not know, then they came to the table and they gave us excellent examples. In addition, Planning Commission staff gave us reams of paper. We got paper through AIA, the American Institute of Architects. We started finding things on the web, and we discovered that to a degree, we had a lot of very interesting things happening here. There were people who, if you'll pardon the expression, were already thinking outside the box. Deb Courier is a case in point. She's the one who has released a number of targets, and Target is one of those groups that goes to bigger and bigger boxes. She went...
And the suburbs too, correct?
Yes, further and further out, which contributes to...
This is one example. Can you give me some others?
Deb had gone to the Department of Social Services and had encouraged them, while they were doing renovation on their site on Billingsley some years back, to go into the Freedom Mall.
Right.
Now, because of that interest, the county is looking at buying the Freedom Mall because that was a happy circumstance, and the people who necessarily did not want to come out there initially discovered that there were amenities that they liked, and more importantly, their clients liked it because it was on transit, and it was easier to get to for some of them than Billingsley.
That's a good example.
and the other classic one that often gets cited and encourages government to come to the table on this is a charter school. A charter school is a creation of government, although it's, you know, it is funded by government, but it's under a charter. And the charter school on North Tryon, called the Sugar Creek Charter School, used an old Kmart.
Yes.
They said it was easy to rehab it because there were no interior walls. And so what they have done is they have built classrooms as they needed them.
Right.
And so they can expand on site with great ease.
Okay, let me ask you something, though.
Yeah.
You know the new, is it the vocational or the technical school that's going up, Charlotte Mecklenburg is building on Allegheny? You have all those empty boxes on Freedom, all those empty boxes on Wilkinson. Why didn't the school system decide to take one of those empty boxes to try to make this new school instead of new construction?
You will have
Granted,
to
it's going to be a beautiful school, Mary, but did you get involved with that?
We have raised that issue repeatedly, and one of the things that is in the report as a recommendation is for government to come to the table. Please look at rehabbing these buildings before you build from scratch. You will have to ask the school system why they opted that. You will notice it was a charter school that did that, not Charlotte Mecklenburg school systems. There is a reluctance. It may be appropriate. I really don't know. But from my perspective, it is frustrating. We would like for them to look at them.
I got to get your opinion on what was just in the paper today. The closed Hannaford store across from Park Road Shopping Center. We learn now it's going to be raised, and specialty shops are going to go in that space. Did your commission get involved with that developer trying to save that building and just go in like a Black Lion did and use existing space?
Redevelopment is not always the best use.
Okay, that was a new building.
Yeah, and there are a number of new buildings. Actually, in that particular case, one of the reports that I've read have said, are we overbuilt or under demolished? Just recently, for a long time people redid them. Just recently we've discovered that they are going in and demolishing and building from scratch because the location is good enough. I don't have any problem. I just want the dead carcass off my inner city neighborhoods.
Okay. Target, we mentioned them a little bit earlier, and their philosophy, if I'm not mistaken here, that they were in the center city for years, and now they're spreading out and abandoning this space. The one on Tyvola is being demolished, and what, a Costco is going in?
No.
No?
BJ's.
Oh, BJ's is going.
BJ's
well, they had a
going
sign
there.
up for Costco.
Oh, the Tyvola. Yes,
Yes.
the Tyvola is Costco, and the one on Independence is BJ's.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Buildings demolished, and why couldn't they use existing space?
Well, it is not always possible to use them, and that's one of the things that we learned. Our original reaction was much as yours. What we discovered is there are some retailers in particular that have a prototype, and they prefer to sell from that prototype. It works for them. They've gotten it worked out so that it functions efficiently for them. So retrofitting is not always the best way. We've been pleased that we are seeing some demolition.
So you're pleased about that?
Yeah, anything that gets the abandoned property off the unsightly list, because it has a negative impact on the neighborhoods that surround it. And that is particularly true in the inner city, and that's where we put a lot of our energy in this study.
I see.
Because these are buildings that are smaller, they're 20, 30 years old. The other ones may turn over in 2 years or less. These sit around year after year after year.
So that's your challenge.
That's our major challenge. But many of those are on transit corridors, so there will be reinvigoration of those as we build transit. And also the manager's office in city government is starting an economic development division, or beefing up what they're already doing. And so we have great hope that they will take what are strictly our investigations, no major recommendations in there. We'll take them and run with them, and we'll see on Monday night.
There's a bright spot then, right?
Well, we felt brightened by it.
Okay. Mary Hopper, we got to run. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And now for a topic that's starting to take shape in a number of Charlotte neighborhoods, the push to be declared a historic district. For some neighborhoods, it's happening with little fanfare or fuss. For others, it's enough to nearly tear a neighborhood apart. Having the right to do what you wish with your home and property versus restoring, preserving, or rehabilitating your home and the neighborhood where you live. It's a very hot and controversial topic here in Charlotte, and for some neighborhoods, the battle has come nothing short of civil war. The last neighborhood to achieve historic status was Wesley Heights, a predominantly black neighborhood. Now the Wilmore neighborhood, which is also predominantly black, is seeking historic designation. Recently, Myers Park tried to obtain historic status, but it was denied thanks to a very strong and vocal opposition within the neighborhood. And the Elizabeth neighborhood actually did get historic status 5 years ago, but that designation was overturned in court a year later. Some call the historic status too restrictive. Others call it an insurance policy on stability. But is it doing more harm than good? And here to help sort through the controversy is Mark Fischerow, chairman of the Historic District Commission. Mark, let me ask the question, the push to actually do this. Is it history or hysteria?
Oh, I think it's history. I mean, these neighborhoods have real historic bases. Wesley Heights, for example, you know, the architectural fabric, the streetscape is very unique and unfortunately far too few and far between in Charlotte. Dilworth is another example of that. All the districts are examples of an entire neighborhood, and these are neighborhoods. They're not artifacts.
Right. And the four that, I'm sorry, the four currently
are 4th Ward, Dilworth, Plaza Midwood, and Wesley Heights.
And Wesley Heights. Wilmore now has applied.
Right.
Why Wilmore?
Well, I think Wilmore is very similar to some of these other neighborhoods. It's an old neighborhood. There's a lot of fabric in that neighborhood that if it can be preserved, maintains the sort of value and the integrity of the neighborhood. And that's really what a lot of these folks are really after, is to try to not lose what they have now.
And what they had, because most recently, let's be frank, Wilmore has been a troubled neighborhood with crime in the area. So is this a way to help make that a better place for all residents?
Well, I think in the case of Wilmore, I can't speak for Wilmore, but I think in the case of Wilmore, they see the adjacent South End development. They see their sister neighborhood, Dilworth, prospering. You know, Dilworth has prospered for some time now. But South End development is really starting to take hold. The transit line coming, the trolley line, and all of that coming through adjacent to their neighborhood. And I think they see a chance to, they know that their neighborhood is going to really make a turn. It's already starting to. And what they're concerned about is making sure that it makes the right turn, that it doesn't turn into something they don't want it to turn into. They don't, specifically that they don't lose that fabric of the neighborhood and the streetscapes and the residential character in some places that they currently have.
Well, what are they concerned about? South End feeding into that neighborhood? I read something about the baseball stadium. If it's built in South End, which touches Wilmore, there could be concern that other businesses could build up in the neighborhood?
Well, I don't think necessarily, by definition, South End is a threat to Wilmore. I think what Wilmore, I would hope that what Wilmore's trying to do is use the impetus and the financial investment associated with South End to help them bring their neighborhood back, so to speak.
Okay.
But I think they're probably also looking at it from the perspective of trying to avoid that being totally unleashed development.
Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
On the flip side of that coin, could there be investors in South End really pushing for Wilmore or hoping Wilmore is declared historic to make their property more valuable?
It's entirely possible. But you know, you can't read every individual resident and property owner's mind, but there's a lot of different perspectives on it. But what's clear is that at least a sizable number of people in that neighborhood have decided that now's the time.
Okay. What opposition have you heard? Any?
To
keeping in
Wilmore?
mind, yeah, to Wilmore. Keeping in mind there was a lot of opposition
Yes.
to Myers Park and also Elizabeth.
I think Wilmore's too early to tell.
It's that new.
Yeah, they have not. They're still in the process of defining the boundaries. They have a preliminary boundary for where that district will start and stop. Because again, these aren't individual buildings that we're looking at. These are within certain defined boundaries. The commission would have the authority to enforce policy, that boundary line may very well move. As you know, for example, I found out this afternoon that tonight, I believe, as we sit here, there is a public meeting in Wilmore with the neighbors, trying to explain what this process is. I know that when Elizabeth was in the process of becoming a district, there were a few businesses in the area that were defined within the boundaries that didn't want to be in the boundaries because they felt they weren't really part of the historic neighborhood. And
didn't want to be restricted. Now
Right,
let's go to those
exactly.
restrictions. What does it mean to be historic?
Well, one thing I always stress to the commission is there's a tendency for people to think that historic means it's a craftsman bungalow built in 1910. But I've stressed to them that history didn't stop in 1910. I mean, there are buildings that are built in 1950 and 1960 that are wonderful buildings that they're a part of the fabric now. There are buildings that were built in 1970 that are last year that have become part of the fabric. But it's being a historic district does not mean that new development can't happen by no stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
For example, you look at a neighborhood like Dilworth, where
Right.
I live.
Okay.
In the late 70s, that neighborhood was in trouble. Believe it or not. I mean, anybody who's not been here, wasn't here back then, wouldn't believe it. But that neighborhood was, comparable to what Wilmore is now.
Huh.
And Fourth Ward was the first district. It became a district in 1976. And I think what happened was I wasn't here then, but I think the neighbors in Dilworth said, hey, the only way we're going to save this neighborhood, or one of the only ways we're going to save it, is to try to get some guidelines so that we don't get run over.
Well, give me some examples here. What are we talking about? What type of guidelines?
Well, we have a policy manual. Primarily, the focus of the guidelines, and what happens is if somebody lives within that district and they want to do it, first of all, it does not deal with interior to the property at all.
Strictly exterior.
Totally exterior. Give you an example there are some exterior things that can be done with staff approval. We have two staff that work with the city.
Okay, staff as opposed to?
To a commissioner. There are two staff and there are 10 commissioners. The staff are paid, commissioners are volunteer.
Okay.
But the staff does not vote on any of the commissioners actually have the voting power. But what happens is a person wants to put an addition on the back of their house.
Right, that's major then, correct?
Well, not necessarily. If that addition is mid-block, and it's not wider nor taller than the main original house, it's entirely possible, in fact it happens all the time, that gets administratively approved by staff.
How quickly?
It can happen in a matter of days.
Now, we've heard horror stories that it could take, months if it goes through a commission?
It's interesting. You always hear the horror stories. You never hear the people that are happy. We have people walk out and go, man, this worked really well, and I always tell them as they're going out the door, make sure you tell somebody about it.
Right.
Because the horror stories, I think, are I'm sure there are a few exceptions where government has tripped, and there's some other government agency or there's some conflict, and it becomes the victim becomes the applicant. But 9 times out of 10, it's the applicant not. You can't expect to do. They know the rules going in.
Okay.
And they can't expect to do an entirely new house or an entirely new office building You know, we have some people who come in, they do an entirely new house. They don't really hire an architect. They don't hire a real design professional. They try to kind of come in and design this house and do it on the dining room table of their home.
So this commission or the staff would oversee this to make sure it's done properly?
Yeah, and staff works with them.
Okay.
We actually have a process that's called design review, which is an informal 2 or 3 commissioners meet with applicants 2 weeks before their actual commission hearing.
So the input is there. Let me ask you, are you going to tell me what color I can paint my house?
No, absolutely not.
How about vinyl siding?
No, the vinyl siding won't be approved. The exception to that, we have approved vinyl siding on very rare occasions when it's part of a development or part of a structure that was already built and when the neighborhood became a district, therefore was grandfathered in, and somebody wants to do an addition to that, and for the sake of continuity, there have been rare occasions when we've approved vinyl siding. But
very quickly, in a nutshell, the reason why historic district is beneficial to a resident.
Well, I think it gives them some peace of mind that that what they bought into when they came to the neighborhood will not drastically change. It will change. These are living neighborhoods, and I don't want to let anybody think that this is historic preservation in the sense of the Battery in Charleston. That's an extreme. That's an extremely wonderful place. It's a different place.
Okay, Mark Fisher, we're going to have to say goodnight.
Sure.
September 17th is the public hearing, and then October 17th, I believe, City Council will vote, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mark Fisher.
You bet.
And if you're interested in sharing your questions or concerns about other Charlotte area issues here on Charlotte Tonight, you can contact us here at the station. Our email address is charlotte_tonight@wtvipbs.org. Or you can mail your letter to WTVI, 3242 Commonwealth Avenue, Charlotte, 28205. I'm Joey Popp, filling in for Chris Clackham. For everyone here at Charlotte Tonight, thanks for joining us.